Welcome back to Finding Joy in the Hard, where you'll get to hear powerful stories from people of all walks of life who've gone through incredible challenges and have come out the other side. I'm your host, Suzanne Andorra Barron. I'm a yoga instructor, a meditation coach, and a certified Jinshin Jitsu practitioner. I started this podcast to remind you that you are so much stronger than you think you are, and that light can be found in the dark and joy in the hard. I know what it's like when life feels too hard. My oldest child, Christopher, had leukemia 3 times and passed at the age of 9. But those are facts. They don't define our life. We had fun, joy, and laughter amidst hard times. I hope you see yourself in my guests and in me. Maybe not in our actual experiences, but in our ability to dig deep and find strength. I'm excited to share my conversation with Becca Ingersoll with you today. Becca and I recorded this conversation in early February. So if anything sounds out of sorts, it's because we recorded it a while ago. Becca defines herself as a daughter of God, a wife, and a twin mom who's chosen to focus on blessings in life, even when life is hard. She's a writer, a blogger, a podcaster, and an activist who's passionate about helping others know they aren't alone. Her battles with infertility, having micro, preemie NICU babies, and having a son get diagnosed with leukemia have armed her with firsthand knowledge of how to help lift others out of the trenches. Becca and I have a few common shared experiences, and I think that's why we were drawn together in this podcasting group run by Kathy Heller. Despite all that Becca and her family have been through, and it's been a lot, she is a ray of light. Originally, when we recorded, I only planned to release this episode on audio, but I wanted you to be able to see this very strong woman who is advocating for other moms to make sure they feel less alone and that they have the resources they need to withstand their own trials. So welcome, Becca.
Thank you so much for having me. I am really looking forward to talking to you more.
Oh, me too. Me too. And can you just share with my listeners where you're from, where you live?
Absolutely. I live in Utah in a town called Layton. It's about half an hour north of Salt Lake.
Oh, I know Layton.
Okay, yeah.
So we've been going to Park City before Park City was popular.
That's a long time.
It is a really long time ago. So my parents bought a house there in 1981, probably before you were born.
Yeah, by 4 years. Yep.
And so we were, and it wasn't in the Olympics yet. It wasn't anything. And it was nice. It was so nice.
Yeah. My husband and I go to Park City most years for our anniversary trip. So yeah, we love it up there. But it would have been very different before it got so popular.
I know. Okay. So wanted to break the ice a little bit before we get into the really hard.
Yeah.
So Becca, can you start with your first hard?
Okay. Well, the first hard that I usually tell people about is the fact that I struggled with infertility. So my college sweetheart, Josh, and we got married fairly young, which is pretty common in Utah. But I was 20 and we wanted to just be the two of us for several years and enjoy that time together. And we did for several years. And then we'd been married about 5 years when we decided to start seriously trying. And I thought that we'd be able to conceive like that, snap of a finger, because everyone on both sides of our family, to our knowledge, was like that. But it wasn't that case for me. So it took 5 years of us trying to conceive before we got our miracle twin boys. And I got pregnant with them on our 4th IUI, which is an intrauterine insemination. So if we hadn't succeeded, that was like our last chance. And then if that one didn't work, we would have moved on to IVF, but we thankfully didn't need to. But it was a lot of hard years of praying for kids, wanting them desperately, being surrounded by families and peers who had kids, and just feeling like those prayers weren't answered yet.
Yeah, I've spoken to a lot of women here on the podcast, young women
Mm-hmm.
who had infertility challenges.
Yeah.
And you expect it for women in their mid to late
Yeah.
30s, early
Mm-hmm.
40s, but not in their 20s.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's actually the statistic might be different now, but it's 1 in 8 women struggled with infertility. That's for like any age.
How rough that. First of all, let me just back up. So you got married
Yeah.
when you were in college?
Yes. Yeah. So I met Josh as a friend my freshman year, and we were friends for maybe 6 months or so before we started dating. And then we got married the following spring. So we dated for a little over a year. And then I got married when I was still in college, but I also took longer to graduate. So
Okay.
yeah. So like I graduated at the end of 2010 and we got married in 2006.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, you said it's interesting that people get married younger in Utah, outside Park City, right? But
Right. Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Because I didn't get married until I was 31.
Yeah. And that's when I had my boys.
Wow. Right. Because you got pregnant at 30 and then had them at 31. And so, okay. So it took you 4 years to get pregnant and having to use intervention, right?
Right.
And then you're finally pregnant and you must be
Yes,
over the moon.
absolutely. And so should we launch into the next the
Yes.
next
Let's go into the
card?
next card.
Okay. So we were overjoyed. We knew we were having 2 boys. We'd had one of their names picked out, Lincoln Dean, for years. And we came up with the second name, Logan Atticus. We were so excited. And they decided they wanted to come earthside very early. So I went into preterm labor and I delivered that. They couldn't stop the contractions. I was life flighted to a different hospital and I had them at 23 weeks, 6 days gestation.
Oh my gosh, I'm getting chills because 23 weeks for boys.
Yeah.
So my oldest son was a preemie
Okay.
and he was born 9 weeks early.
Yeah, that's
And
a lot. Yeah.
and
For
nine
back
weeks
then
was,
too.
yeah, right. For back then, because he was born in 2098. He was born in 1998.
Uh-huh.
And so back then, 9 weeks was a lot.
Yeah.
And I remember them telling us that if he were a girl, he'd be further developed
Yep.
and he wouldn't
Absolutely.
need as much assistance. Thankfully, because it was 9 weeks and
Yeah.
not 23, he
Yeah.
caught up. Everything was regular.
Oh,
Everything was
good.
fine. Yes, yes. But 23 weeks, I mean, it's almost unheard of that
Yeah.
boys would survive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know how the medical world is. There are constantly advances and things like that. But technically, most states consider 24 weeks the age of viability.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
we were just a few hours away from that. But depending on the hospital we were at, some hospitals would have denied any interventions because they weren't 24 weekers yet. So, but we were luckily not at one of those hospitals. But they still just each had a 50% chance of survival. They each weighed 1 pound, 10 ounces, and they both made it. That's why we call them our miracle boys on multiple fronts, but they were in NICUs for 5.5 months before coming home.
Wow. Oh my gosh. 5.5 months, 8.5 months.
Yeah.
So two different NICUs, right?
Yeah. So it was kind of I don't know, we played musical chairs with NICUs, it kind of seemed like. So we delivered at one that was closest to our house. And then about 6 weeks into their stay, Lincoln, at that hospital, they couldn't get a vein. Like, obviously, at that age, they constantly need meds and need to draw blood for tests and everything, but they're so tiny that it's hard to get sometimes. And so sometimes they need like specialized teams in order to place a PICC line. And no one at McKay, our first hospital, was able to. So they sent him down to primary children's, which is about 45, 50 minutes away from our house. And he was there for, I want to say 2 weeks while Logan was still at McCady. It was somewhere around there. That was a very long 2 weeks. Like Josh and I were dividing and conquering all the time. And we felt guilty whenever we didn't get to visit both of them on any given day. And then they were able to pull strings. The hospital and social workers were able to pull strings, and they got Logan transferred to the University of Utah Hospital, which is connected to Primary Children's by a bridge. So they were still technically in different hospitals, but we could walk to both of them. And then toward the end, the last couple of months, they were able to move Lincoln with Logan to University of Utah.
Oh my goodness. Like, you know, you always think back to your own experience if you have a shared experience, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And well, first of all, I just recall with myself, I wasn't even allowed to drive for X number of weeks. I don't remember what it was, but I remember I had to have people drive me to the hospital to go see my son.
Well, this is there aren't many, but this is one benefit to having 23 weekers. They were tiny. And so my personal recovery was totally fine. It wasn't an emergency C-section. I delivered both of them vaginally.
Okay.
But like it wasn't a normal, like for me, delivering, it wasn't anything compared to delivering a full-term baby.
Got it. Okay. Let me ask you this. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine.
No,
But
that's fine.
did you pump and then feed that way?
Yeah, well, originally, yes, I did. So I started pumping immediately, and I was blessed I produced a lot of milk. We ended up by the end, when we stopped giving them bottles, I still had milk left over, and I donated leftover milk.
Oh,
so,
that's
so
fabulous.
that was good, but it was a long time before they were eating by mouth. So they had tubes down their throat, and it started out tiny amount that they would push through the tube. And I was actually just looking through pictures the other day of when we first started trying bottle and breastfeeding, and Josh is holding a bottle, and it is literally like 2.5 or 3 inches tall. And that's all of the milk that they could get through the mouth at one feed at that point. So it was constantly moving up the increments of milk. And then they also, a lot of the time, if babies are intubated for a long time, which mine were, then it can cause eating and feeding issues and speech issues down the road. So their formula had to be thickened. Well, not formula, their breast milk had to be thickened.
Oh.
And then Lincoln ended up needing, it's a whole long story. It was one thing after another. For one reason or another, eventually Lincoln couldn't have my breast milk. And so then we had to move to a formula, which was a thicker formula.
And also you're dealing, okay, I'm sharing my experience, but
yeah, you're good.
You're dealing with the trauma of the early birth.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like Josh and I mentioned, I always think of this when I think of delivering them. So when you deliver, it doesn't matter at least at the hospital we were in, and I would imagine most hospitals, it doesn't matter what the circumstances around the birth were. You're still put in the same, what's the postnatal?
Oh, you don't mean the NICU?
No, not NICU, the mother.
Oh, yes, mother baby
unit. You're still put in the same mother baby unit. So that first night when my boys were in the NICU and on oxygen, intubated, tiny, and all of this, we hadn't been planning on them for 4 more months. I remember hearing babies crying all around me in the other rooms. And I told Josh, like, I was trying to make a joke out of it, but it hurt so bad. I was like, I think the babies are mocking us. It just seemed like there was no forgetting what had just happened.
Yes, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and touching my belly and expecting to be pregnant.
Yeah.
And then just begging, wishing, praying I could still be pregnant.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
And then no, you can't, right? And then
and then going home from the
I was going to
hospital.
say that. Two
That,
days. Is that how long you were in for?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
2 days they send you home and you have to leave your babies behind.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
I, from talking to other NICU moms, I feel like it was a little easier for me than some other people. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was hard. And we took a long time packing up. I think I was like, oh, we have to get this. And we have to, I was like dawdling, not wanting to leave. But I was also, anyone who stayed overnight in a hospital knows that it's not restful sleep. So I was looking forward to a good night's sleep without being interrupted by nurses and monitors and everything all night. So I was looking forward to that. My mom was coming home with us and she was going to, she's one of my best friends. She was going to help us for however long. And we have a great neighborhood with lots of friends. And so we came home to, I'm going to cry, but gifts on the porch and like a heart attack on our garage door with all sorts of wonderful messages and things like that. So it was like, okay, we're not alone. People are praying for us. They're just,
Mm.
the boys are just 15 minutes away where they're supposed to be. It's okay. But I mean, it was still hard. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember I too dwaddled and I would, and even let me ask you this, for me, even when I brought Christopher home, it was just one day shy of 4 weeks.
Uh-huh.
That was scary too,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure. Because you've been with all of the experts that know how to combat any problem that arises, and then it's all on you. And my boys came home on oxygen. So we also had tubes everywhere. Luckily, they were long, so we could walk around our house with them. But then we had to detangle tubes all the time, and we had the monitors beeping if one of their oxygen levels dropped below. And that was all night too. So we were not only dealing with crying babies, two of them, but also beeping monitors. A lot.
Oh my goodness. And there's so many, were they on apnea monitors too?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay. So apnea is when you stop breathing in the middle of the night, for
Mhm.
those of you that don't know. And Christopher too came home on an apnea monitor, but the way they presented it to us was this. So the night before he was discharged, he stopped breathing in the middle of the night, but it's okay. We don't expect that to happen to you. So you don't need an apnea monitor. And I'm
Oh
like,
no.
what? Like, I'm not
Oh yeah. No.
sleeping. I am not sleeping if I don't
Right.
take
That's
one.
shocking that they said that.
Because I think that, yeah, it was shocking. So we brought the apnea monitor home, and you know what? He never did. They were right. He actually never did
Yeah.
stop breathing in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
He stopped breathing when he was feeding. He
Oh
would
yeah.
forget to breathe.
Lincoln did that. That's one of the main reasons why I had to stop breastfeeding. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Christopher could never breastfeed. It was always until like, and then I finally just switched to formula because
Yeah.
I was
Mm-hmm.
losing
Yep.
breastfeeding, waking up,
Uh-huh.
pumping.
I get it.
Yeah, I know you know. And then feeding and
Yep.
times two. When did you ever sleep?
I know I did, but I did have a lot of help. Josh is great, and my mom helped a lot, and other friends, but it was a lot for
Oh,
sure.
yeah, I think you're underplaying it, Becca. I think it was.
I do remember we ended up, Josh and I can't remember exactly why. We had this beautiful nursery that we decorated and we're so excited about, but really early on we were like, yeah, this isn't going to happen. So we rearranged our sleeping arrangements, and I remember Josh being so excited when we got to finally sleep in our own beds, not next to the, but I mean, I was too, but Josh was like, I am he was really excited. I think we did that like
Oh.
the following Christmas or something like that. So we went a few months with
So you stayed in the
sleeping in.
babies' rooms.
No, they came into ours
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
for some time. And for some reason, I'm not remembering why. Sometimes we would sleep on the couches with them downstairs because it was easier, but I can't remember why it was easier, but it was.
Probably because you were exhausted. Had to climb the stairs. I don't know, but it could be that
It might
crazy.
have been the oxygen, like because the oxygen tanks were like massive, and we had two, one for each of them, and the tubes
That
were
sounds
long,
right.
but like we would have to move them from downstairs to upstairs, like you couldn't go on both levels with it. So that might have been it that we didn't want
Yeah,
the
that makes
oxygen.
sense.
Yeah.
But now the hards didn't stop there.
No, they didn't. I mean, Josh and I got so much closer together throughout the whole NICU experience, and it was wonderful and still is, our relationship is. But when you go through a few hard things, I don't know about you, but sometimes people like me think, oh, hey, that was my trial. That was my trial. I got over it. I passed the test. God isn't going to give me more. But that's not
Yes.
the case.
Yes. You think you're done. You're
Yeah.
like, no, okay, I'm good for life now. Thank you, God. Like,
Yeah, that's not the case.
no.
And so, since our boys were born so early, they did have lasting special needs, Lincoln more than Logan, but we still have different interventions and therapies we have to do with them and things like that. So, that's one ongoing underlying trial, I guess I would call it, but it brings blessings too. But the biggest one, oh, and
Before
I'll
you go
just,
to the big one, before you
yeah,
go to
yeah,
the
yeah,
big one,
yeah.
sorry.
No, you're good.
Can you share what some of the
Yeah,
lasting?
that's what I was just gonna say.
Oh,
So,
okay. I thought you were going to the next
no,
one.
I was almost going there. Yeah. So Lincoln,
Our listeners,
well,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Our listeners are probably like, what?
I know they're on the edge of their seat. What? Uh, so both of my boys had brain bleeds when they were little. Logan's resolved on its own, Lincoln's didn't. And so right before they came home from the NICU, I'm talking like the week they were supposed to come home, I went in one day and we thought we'd avoided this, but they said that Lincoln had to get a shunt. So they'd had their eyes on it the whole time, but we thought we'd avoided it. Not quite. So he had a shunt placed. And then so the hydrocephalus caused that, him needing a shunt, but it also caused he has cerebral palsy, is his main other diagnosis. So, and they're both also on wait lists to get tested for ADHD and the autism spectrum. I suspect Logan is definitely ADHD and Lincoln is definitely on the spectrum, but we'll see. The wait lists are really long in Utah, so we'll see when we get in to see someone. But what was I going to say? Oh, Lincoln is mostly nonverbal. He communicates really well, and he has words, but if you aren't with him a lot, then you might not be able to understand them. And he also can't walk unassisted. He has braces on his feet that we put on every day, and he uses a walker most of the time or a wheelchair for long distances. So those are the main special needs.
And how are you and Josh like with handling all of this? Because it's a lot.
It's a lot. I will say I am doing really good right now, but there were a lot of tough, I would say, years. So they're 7 now. The boys are 7. I would say, well, when they were babies, definitely it was kind of a blur.
Yeah.
And then when they got a little bit older, they were able to start going to preschool, which was really helpful, and then kindergarten, which was really helpful. So that eased things. But as far as my emotional health, by the time the big hard that we're coming up on was
Yes.
over, I was so depleted and just felt like this was going to be my life forever. I'm always going to be a caretaker. I won't be able to pursue any of my own dreams, things like that. But it is a lot of appointments, I'm so blessed that my mom lives close and is an angel. So she comes to watch Logan when I have to take Lincoln to things like that. But like my boys catch things easier because they were micro preemies. And so they were sick more often and lots of appointments and follow-up appointments and therapy appointments. It was just a lot of things that I don't think the typical average parent has to deal with. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lincoln being nonverbal or mostly nonverbal
Yeah.
and not be able to walk unassisted. I mean,
Yeah, you're always and his favorite thing to do is walk. Like he wants to walk. So he loves holding your hand and just walking all over with you. So he will come and grab your we have all these jokes about like we're at a family event and he goes up to someone's leg and pulls himself up and he's like, oh, he caught you. You're going on a walk. But it does make it so there's less downtime. Or if there is downtime and you're like, no, Lincoln, I need to sit for a while, then you feel guilty because he just wants to walk.
Oh,
I don't know.
yeah.
And the
Okay.
communication is very difficult too, the lack of communication. Like, for example, even just this morning, like in the it's getting better. It's getting better, but if he wants something but doesn't know how to express it, he whines. He whines a lot. So and no pointing or anything. And it's like, what do you want, buddy? And you feel bad, but it gets annoying.
Yeah. And like how tough, first from the child
Yes.
perspective, like how tough for him, right?
Yep.
How tough that like at 7, he struggles to get what he wants across, right?
Absolutely.
On the other end of the spectrum, mom, I mean, it's a lot for you. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. I recently listened to, I think you had her on your show. Have you interviewed Carolee Garrison yet?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So she has 3 kids on the spectrum, and she talked about in one of her episodes about how moms talk about, the typical advice. They're only young once, soak it up because they'll grow up and they'll leave your house. And she was like, I don't think that's my story. And I,
Um,
I kind of I have a slightly different perspective than she does, but it's similar. Like when parents talk about phases of kids or whatever, Lincoln, I mean, I don't know exactly what technically age he functions at, but I would say probably a 2 or 3 year old, even though he's
okay.
7. So it's just like there are pros and cons to it. He still loves to cuddle all the time, but which is so super sweet. He's a sweetheart. But there are also things that he's not potty trained yet. That you have seven
Okay.
year olds and you would assume you'd be beyond diapering.
Okay. Yeah. And what is his relationship with Logan? Are they
They're really cute together. They have very different likes and dislikes, like very different. So a lot of they aren't like quote unquote. Well, I was gonna say they aren't best friends like you would think of with twins, but that's not true. Logan calls Lincoln his best friend. They love each other. They play together some, but they also do separate activities a lot. I know whenever Lincoln's sick, Logan is really sweet and wants to like come and give him hugs and kisses and tries to bring him his like favorite stuffed animals and things like that.
mm,
Or like we cheer the boys on when they reach milestones all the time. So like if Lincoln has a G tube. I haven't gotten there yet, but he has a G tube.
oh,
So when
okay.
when he takes bites by mouth, Logan's like, or like they're cute. But
Oh,
do
and
like
is Logan at 7 years old? Is he at a 7 year old?
played. So they were both in special needs programs at their schools, but he's not nearly as delayed as Lincoln.
Okay.
So just to give you an idea, like Logan talks talks your ear off, like he walks, he runs, all of those. He's not doesn't need physical therapy. He is in speech therapy still and occupational therapy at school, but he doesn't need it enough to need it outpatient as well. So they're in first grade and Logan is getting his numbers in alphabet, but he still doesn't know all of them. And we're
Okay.
halfway through the year. So that gives you an idea. And both Josh and I are voracious readers, always loved reading. I'm a former English teacher and librarian, so it's some adjusting. It's not for lack of us trying to teach them to read, you know?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. So that's a lot of hards.
Yeah. My go-to is to paste on a happy face. I'm sure you can see that. And for the most part, it's not fake. Like I'm much better at being authentic and naming the hards now than I used to be. But yeah, there are a lot of little. So I'm a writer and I'm working on a memoir. I know you have one that's going to come out, and I'm so excited about reading it when it is out. But like in it, one of the things that I wrote about that I just thought of is just the little the little cuts that happen all the time. Some are deep
Mm.
cuts, but some are just little paper cuts, but they're daily reminders of how your life isn't what you thought it would be.
So what's a little cut for you?
Newborn pictures, for example,
Mm.
the mom seeing pictures of like just things that always wanted but don't get to do or never got to do.
I know.
So like yeah, so like I was never able to have newborn pictures. The boys were 5.5 months old by the time they got home, and they were hooked up to everything in the hospital. So like we have pictures of them, obviously, but like the cute newborn pictures where a professional photographer comes in and takes pictures. Like I know now some people do that for NICU babies, but I didn't get that. And it's also like visiting family who have just had babies and they're holding their baby in their room the night they were born, things like that. You want to be happy for them. It's so hard because you wanted
Yes.
that and didn't get it. Or
Yes.
or hearing, I don't know. This is going to sound petty, and I'm not judging other parents at all, but just some you asked what are those little cards. Just things like parents complaining about trying to get their kid to eat. I'm like, "Yes, it's hard. I'm trying not to judge or compare, but I can almost guarantee we know a million times your hardship of
Yeah.
trying to get a kid to
Yeah.
eat." Yeah.
Yeah. I get that. I mean, I'm jumping ahead, right? As you do. But after Christopher got diagnosed with leukemia the first time, and just hearing, and we all do it. I mean, like,
Yes.
I'm sure I do this now, right? Without a
Mm-hmm.
doubt, I do it. But when you're in that vulnerable, delicate space, and I remember I was with someone and they were complaining about their day
Yeah.
and knew that
The middle
my
of
child
treatment.
was fighting cancer.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my God, just like, you are
Yeah.
so lucky. Like, just
Uh-huh.
appreciate this moment because you get to complain. Like,
Yes,
how lucky are you that
exactly.
you get to complain? And the next
Yeah.
time I complain, I'm going to think that, like,
Yeah,
celebrate
I like that.
in my gratitude journal tonight. I got to complain.
Yes, exactly. I like the that phrasing. It's true.
Yeah. But I know what you mean, because when you're in that really hard place, life gets really present. Don't you find that? Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you're not living in autopilot. You're wide
No.
awake.
Mm-hmm. In survival mode, but at uh, you have to be ready for an emergency at the drop of a hat. Yeah.
Yes. I'm wondering, before we go to your next hard, I'm wondering if this was a little cut for you too. No baby shower.
I actually did have a
Oh,
baby
you did.
shower.
After.
This is after they were born. This is actually really ironic slash funny. So I knew that since they were twins, most likely they'd come early. And so I was trying to be a planner and make sure that I got a baby shower. So they were due in May, and I wanted to be positive that I'd get a baby shower. So I had my mom and family schedule a baby shower for the end of January. So like 3 months early or something like that. And and some people were kind of annoyed that I was doing it that early. Why is she doing it that early? And like,
Yeah.
comments and stuff. I'm like,
Yep.
I want to make sure I get it before I go into labor. And it didn't happen.
So wait, what month were they born?
They were born in January, January 10th.
And
The
your
shower was after that. Yeah. But yeah, so I actually did get baby showers, but not before they were born.
and not before. And it's not that, I mean, it's great that you had it after. I get
Mm-hmm.
it. We had a big christening after because we didn't have, we had
Yeah.
a much bigger christening because we didn't have the baby shower,
Yeah.
because we wanted to bring people in and
Mm-hmm.
celebrate.
Yeah.
But there's something about that anticipatory, it's like your wedding shower, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
anticipatory
Yep.
feeling, like
Mm-hmm.
excitement,
Yes. And
your
also,
post.
yes. And also, I will say, since they were so young, and since everyone knows, like you hear 23 weeker and it's not a sure thing that they're coming home. So any congratulations is, and I totally get it. I do it even still if someone delivers early, but all of the congratulations, in the back of their minds, they're saying congratulations, but they also don't know if they need to say sorry. It's like, it's not a full
Yeah.
exciting celebration.
I do get it because when Christopher was born, I did hear congratulations and I was like, no. I mean,
Yeah.
we knew he would come home because 9 weeks
Yeah.
is enough, right?
Right.
But 8 weeks would have been even better because at that
Yeah,
time,
exactly.
8 weeks
Every
would have
single
been
day counts. Yeah.
exactly. And they test them in the NICU to see
Mm-hmm.
where they fall. Like you might tell them you're, say, 31 weeks, but or you think maybe you're close to 32 weeks because
Right.
you
You
don't
really
really
know.
know.
Yeah.
But then they test them and they're like, no, 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 he's 31 weeks. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they
Yeah.
know. But the congratulations, I agree, because it was like, no, this is not a good thing. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know what people are supposed to say, and I'm
Yeah,
not
I
faulting
don't know what
anyone.
I don't even know what I would have wanted to hear. I would have been sad if they hadn't said congratulations. It's just not the same.
Yeah, yeah. I just remember, I do remember those days and they were dark and I did remember thinking that when leukemia came around, I was like, what? No, like,
Mm-hmm.
no, we're done.
Absolutely. Yep.
Skip over, go to another family, which
Uh-huh.
sounds so terrible to hear.
No, I know it
But you're
does.
like, someone else, if someone has to have it, we're done, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And
So
not
on
that I
that,
would wish it upon anyone.
no, no, but you just, like we talked about earlier, you thought you'd passed the hard test. Like,
Exactly.
and leukemia is another huge hard test. Yeah.
Okay, share your next hard.
Okay. So Suzanne and I met in a podcasting group. We were in the course together with Kathy Heller, and we had obviously several similarities, and so we were drawn to each other. But the final biggest hard that I'll share about is that my own son was diagnosed with leukemia. So Lincoln, we joke that it's not funny, but if you don't laugh, you cry, right? We joke that he drew the short straw out of the twins. So all of the hard things, he's the one that gets it. So when he was 3, a few months before he turned 3, he had to have a shunt revision. His shunt had failed and they had to put a new one in. And he just never quite seemed to bounce back and be his happy, energetic, like smiling, grinning self. And we thought it was a little odd. And then one thing after another just seemed more and more odd, like ear infections back to back to back, even though he was on antibiotics and things like that. Then we took him to his wellness visit in January. And by that time, he was lethargic, he was getting pale. Josh and I had literally spent the night on a makeshift bed in front of the TV with him. I don't know if it was just one night or 2 nights before, because he wanted to be with us, but he didn't want to even come up to our bed. Like he wanted to have the TV on. He couldn't sleep completely. So he wanted to be, anyway, we knew something was wrong. So he also had a sore. And so we had the doctor look at that and we were starting to wonder maybe he's septic, like maybe something's infected or something like that. And his pediatrician, who is wonderful, he was like, this is very common for Lincoln's story. Doctors say he's a special case because he has such a big medical history and so many different diagnoses. And so that's what his doctor said. I would feel more comfortable if you took him to primary children's where they have experts and whoever needs to look at him is already there. And so we packed up. Josh was still at work actually, but my mom was here. And so I packed up and took Lincoln down to primary children's. I called Josh on the way. He met me there at the hospital. And then in the ER, they did a blood test and came back and said, there are red flags showing that this might be leukemia. And again, like you said, it was like, are you kidding me? Like, I shouldn't get mad at God, but are you kidding me, God? Like, haven't we been through enough? Hasn't Lincoln been through enough? If this is cancer, I'm going to scream. And it turned out to be cancer. But so that but like we said, like, I just listened to right, right before getting on with you, I was listening to one of your previous episodes that totally made me cry. But about you teaching yoga to kids with cancer.
Oh, yeah.
And you talked about how you had shame about different things. And I have immense shame about different things. And survivor's guilt is one that I have about so many different things, whether it's my 23 weekers surviving, or I still have friends who haven't been able to have babies who want them so desperately, or now Lincoln has survived cancer and it's tough for, and I have survivor's guilt for parents compared to parents who lost their children. And I have a lot of friends who that's their case.
Oh
And
my
so,
goodness.
but he went through, the positive thing is he went through 27 months of treatment. He got done with treatment in March of 2022, so almost 2 years ago.
Okay.
And
Okay.
cancer wise, he's doing well. He's down to a checkup every 6 months.
Okay.
And so it turned out great, but those were a really, really hard 27 months, including, I might add, it was during the pandemic. So he was diagnosed in January 2020. So for most of his treatment, only Josh or I could be with him at the hospital. We couldn't be together. And there were a
Oh,
lot of overnight stays, a lot of scary episodes, and it was tough.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine. There's enough times you have to worry about germs when their counts drop
Yeah,
in
right.
ordinary life.
Yep.
But when you have this thing, and in the beginning, if it was January 2020, you didn't really know there was no vaccines, right? There were no,
No, no.
and you didn't know like anyone with a suppressed immune system, like I'm getting chills talking to you about it.
Yeah,
Anyone with a suppressed immune system was in really, really dangerous situation.
absolutely.
And here your little guy who already gets things easier, right? So
Yep,
without the cancer, they're already more susceptible, both your
yep,
boys.
yep.
And then on top of it, now with leukemia, when their counts drop so easily
Mm-hmm.
and they go into neutropenia, I never wanted to hear that word again.
Right.
And it's a severely, I'm not going to describe it from a medical perspective. It's just a severely suppressed immune system.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
if you have a more medical way of saying it, but yeah. And, I remember when Christopher relapsed and the doctor, he wasn't there yet, but
Mm-hmm.
the doctor, so we had met with just the regular pediatrician and he sent us to the hospital to get a chest x-ray because Christopher had a cough and a
Mm-hmm.
blood test. And I was like, why? It's like a normal
Yeah,
childhood illness. Every time he
right.
got sick, it was
Mm-hmm.
just a normal childhood illness.
Yeah.
One of the pediatricians was his hematologist as well as his pediatrician. So he
Okay.
was his oncologist as well. Even though he's a hematologist, he worked in the
Okay.
oncology clinic.
Okay.
So that day, that one doctor called me to review the tests, and the other doctor was in the room. Just the mere fact that he was in the room
Mm-hmm.
and he started talking
High
about, like,
alert.
yes, exactly. And he started talking about, like, well, he's not quite neutropenic. And I'm like, you're not supposed to say that word because
Right.
I'm not supposed to know what that means, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Once again, the survivor's guilt. I have a lot of friends whose kids have relapsed recently. And I mean,
Oh,
your kid
I'm
going through
so
cancer
sorry.
one time is hell enough. My heart goes out so much to any parent and kid who has to go through it more than once.
I know. And it shouldn't be. Children shouldn't, they
No,
just shouldn't be able to get
they
cancer.
should be off limits. I know.
They should be
That's
off
why
limits.
I am, like a lot of trials do, it has made me be a real advocate for a lot of things. So I do a lot of outreach, a lot of education, a lot of fundraising because our kids deserve more. They don't get nearly as much federal funding for research to improve treatments as they should. It used to be less than 4% of all federal funding. It's increased to maybe 8%, maybe, but no more than that.
That's right. I am being reminded, I think if you give to the American Cancer Society, if you earmark it for children, will it go to children or no?
I would imagine if you earmark it, it would. I
Yeah.
do know this is kind of fun. So the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, they
Yep.
have different chapters around the country
Yep.
and they do different fundraisers. And this year they chose Lincoln to be Utah's honored hero for one of them.
Oh, how
So that's
fabulous.
kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah. So, but Lincoln is fine. He went through, did he have AML or ALL?
He had ALL. So that's
Okay.
not quite as scary as AML. It's
Yes.
a better
So,
prognosis.
yeah. So for listeners, ALL is acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and it's typically coined childhood leukemia. And AML is acute
Myeloid.
myeloid. Why would I forget? I
Uh,
purposely blocked it out of my head.
right? I
Myeloid
understand.
leukemia, and that's more of an adult leukemia. And Christopher ended up having the latter the
Mm-hmm.
third time. And
Yeah.
that's much harder to treat,
Yeah.
especially we're going a little bit off on a tangent, but so we were slowly running out of drugs,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
and we were talking to research centers around the country, even though we were in one of the very top
Yeah. It
cancer
doesn't.
facility. And so we were talking to all these different facilities. And so I knew of a drug for
Mm-hmm.
AML. And
Uh-huh.
I called up the researcher and I said, we need this drug. And they're like, no, because it's only made for adults. Now there's a law that's called right to try. And so the
Mm-hmm.
patient can
Yeah.
request.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I am so pediatric doctors of any
Mhm.
are incredible.
Yes.
Pediatric nurses are incredible.
Mm-hmm.
The researchers at top facilities, these weren't pediatric, but so we called Baylor University. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
remember why I remember that name, but I do. And they had a drug that was going to help AML. And
Mm-hmm.
I picked up the phone and I called the research center and I explained my situation. The top researcher got on the phone with me
Wow.
and said, I'm sorry, but we don't have any more left. But they could have just sent me to like a secretary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And oncologists were getting back to me within hours. And it makes me think when I take 48 hours to get back to someone in these top,
Right.
right?
Right.
And these top doctors are getting back to me within hours. And they're not
Mhm.
even my child's doctor.
Yeah. That
You
is
know,
so
it's
nice.
like, it's amazing who they are. And it's almost like, wow.
For sure. That brought up a couple of things I just wanted to mention for you and for the listeners. With your fight, there are a couple of things that I just am so in awe of that you were able to go through. Something that I think if you haven't been through the childhood cancer world, you might not think of is obviously you're thinking about your kid and getting all of the best care that they can and trying to keep them alive and all of that. But there are all sorts of little time suckers that mothers, especially, often burden, like calling insurance companies and, like you said, trying to find, doing research to try to find the best drugs for their kids in so many cases. And that's another thing I luckily didn't have to worry about too much. Lincoln just did the normal protocol for treatment. But I have so many friends that it's like a full-time job trying to dispute bills if something's been wrong or trying to call this hospital or that hospital to see if they'll see their child. And I just wanted to give voice to that. So they have to make sure that you have insurance in order to get treated. And there are all sorts of layers to this as with any law or whatever, but just think about how hard it is to hear that your child has cancer. But then think about I I feel fortunate that Josh has a good job and he had good insurance. That's not the case for everyone. I think about single parents and how they might have to shoulder all of the bill when they have two or three jobs. And that wasn't the case for me. Or you think about people who
Mm.
don't have insurance at all. How do you like weigh the pros of like helping paying to have your kid be healed? Or I don't know. There are just so many
No.
things with
Yes.
when it comes to billing and insurance. I could go on and on.
No, I know exactly what you mean because I know of children who were fighting leukemia
Mm-hmm.
who had to go into daycare
Yeah.
because the mom
I have
had to
friends.
work.
Yeah, I have friends who same thing. Yep. And
Oh,
so yeah, I can't imagine not having the support, which is one reason I'm so passionate about creating communities where people, even if it's not in person, feel supported and someone gets it and they aren't alone and someone's praying for them. I just started like Patreon memberships and I have a Facebook group, and that's something that I don't want other people to ever have to feel.
Yeah,
That
that's
they're alone.
important. And that's really big that you do that. How do you find joy in the hard?
Yeah. It's so funny. I mentioned that we are so similar in so many different ways. This will probably be in the show notes, but my podcast that I started is so similar to yours. In fact, its name is fairly different. My podcast is called Finding Joy Through Life's Trials. And so that is something that Josh and I have always focused on. We these are big, hard things that we've had to go through, but we knew early on that if we focused on the hard, then that's all we'd be able to see. It's all about perspective. So we've always tried to pick out and pay attention to our blessings, no matter how small they were. And I've already mentioned community, being able to rely on some family and friends, or like we have a Facebook group for childhood cancer moms in Utah that is incredible. And so even though it was during the pandemic and I didn't meet any of them for a long time, I didn't feel alone there. So community, focusing on blessings, faith, a lot of faith and prayers. And yeah, I would say those are my big things.
You know, I agree with you. Blessings, seeing the blessings is huge. I just had this thought, like when you do have life trials, because you have kids and you want to give your kids the best life possible, you do focus on the blessings. And I wonder if you do more than maybe if you didn't have any, like, because maybe you get caught up in maybe, I don't know, what's not working.
I can see that. And another thing while you were talking that reminded me of something else that we focused on. Josh and we always like to laugh. So we definitely laughed together. And traveling, we are huge travelers. We love seeing different places, which was difficult because it was also during the pandemic. But when we could, I sought out any opportunity I could that we could get a benefit from it. This might sound horrible, but some people would be like, no, I don't need anything extra if you ask for help. I was like, nope, I want this, I want this, I want this. I need the help in order to get through this. So I researched which nonprofits would send things. I researched which nonprofits paid for family trips. And we were able to go on things like that. And then I want other families going through it to know about it. So I write blog posts about those things too.
That's huge because I didn't know anything about that. I remember when we came back from Make-A-Wish. Where did you guys do your Make-A-Wish?
We went to Florida, Give Kids the World. So
yeah.
Orlando with Universal Studios and Disney World.
We went to Disney World too, but what a wise idea to look for what nonprofits could. That's amazing.
Yeah. And there are so many. Like I have a constantly running list that I'm always adding to, but like there's a company called Hug Your People that will send you, if your child is diagnosed, like a fold up wagon to cart your kid or supplies to and from the hospital. There are organizations that will give wishes up to not wishes or gifts, I should say, like Sadie Keller Foundation gives a gift up to a certain dollar amount. My boys got one of those electric Jeep things, or we went on 3 different childhood cancer nonprofit family vacations.
Good for you. Yeah, that's so smart. I know when you come back from Give the Kids a World, they have a long list of all the amusement parks you can go to the country, around the country. And we went to King's Dominion in Virginia. We went to this one, where else? Like we definitely took advantage of that too.
See, back east, I think where the states are a little closer together, that would be easier. We weren't able to do too many, but we did the one in Utah, and I purposely planned a trip to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, so that because they have a ton there on the passport. So we did that this past fall.
So just for my listeners, when you come back, so Make-A-Wish sends you anywhere you want, and a lot of kids go to Disney because kids want to go to Disney.
Right.
And then when you're leaving Give the Kids a World, they give you a long list of, I think, almost every amusement park in the country
So
that will
many,
give you
yeah.
free tickets within a year after you get back from Give Kids the World. So you find the blessings, you take it. I don't like the word take advantage.
I don't either, but I don't know how else to
Make
phrase it.
use. You make use of what's available.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're doing all this to help other families. Maybe we'll put a couple of the nonprofits in the show notes.
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can send some to you.
Oh, that would be great. And how do people get in touch with you, Becca?
I am on Instagram at Blingersoll, BL Ingersoll, Ingersoll. That's the easiest way to find me. My blog is also mercy-rose.com.
Okay, and I'll put all of that in the show notes.
And my podcast. This is a new one, so I haven't been announcing my podcast before. My podcast, like I said before, is called Finding Joy Through Life's Trials.
How many episodes are you up to?
I released my 7th today.
Ah,
so
good
I'm
for
at the
you.
beginning.
Yes, but when did you launch?
On Boxing Day, December 26th. America, we don't really celebrate it, but I'm an Anglophile, so my family does.
Oh. So Becca, you've had so many challenges, so many trials, but you have such a smile on your face and you're so brave and so courageous and you rise, right? I think we rise when times are tough. Mm-hmm. My life has gotten easier. Your life,
no, it still has. It's still definitely easier than during treatment.
That is true because you're no longer doing treatment for sure. Yeah. Sometimes we go back to those old ways of being, right?
Yeah.
We go back to complaining over silly things.
Yeah.
But even just doing this interview and talking with you today reminds me of all the little blessings.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So much to be grateful for.
Yeah.
Even amidst the hard.
There is so much to be grateful for amidst the hard. Yeah, I agree with you because it's the gratitude that anchors you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And lets you see. And I just wanted to add, my faith sustained me as well. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have survived without my faith.
No. Mm-mm. Me neither.
I was very angry with God after Christopher died.
Right. I can imagine.
I had no relationship with him. All I would do is swear at him. Mm-hmm. And a woman at my church said, at least you were still talking to him.
It's true. It's so true. If you haven't said that in one of your other episodes, please leave that in because I have a friend who I think could hear that right now. She recently lost her son and I don't know what to say, but you've been there.
So this is how it worked for me. So I was so angry with him and I would not talk to him. And all I did was yell the really bad word to him. And then I kept looking outside of myself to how to survive. I kept asking people, like, how do you do it? How do you live? How do you want to live again? So I couldn't pray any longer because I didn't have the words to pray.
Yep.
So I purchased a Bible study, not even from my faith. So I'm Catholic. I wasn't Catholic. It was some Christian, but it wasn't Catholic. But I bought a Bible study and I studied it and I read scripture. And Catholics don't usually read scripture on their own. Just reading that Bible every day helped me to be more present and more focused and have realizations. And if I didn't do that every single day, then I went back into that dark hole. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I pushed him away, him being God. I pushed him away. And then I realized the only way I could survive is with a relationship with him.
Yep. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. Becca, thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You're such a delight. You spread such sunshine. So
thank you. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
You're welcome. And you too.
Thank you.
Takeaways. 1, if we focus on the hard, that's all we'll be able to see. 2, pay attention to your blessings, no matter how small. 3, community is important, even if you can't be in the same location. 4, you're not alone. There's always support. 5, faith and prayer are crucial. 6, laughter is so important and helps lighten the load. 7, If you're going through a tough time, there are nonprofit resources available for support. Okay, so my healing tip for you today is to start a gratitude journal if you haven't done so already. I've suggested this before, and I'm doing it again because writing down your blessings helps you to see them more clearly. When you keep a gratitude journal, you notice those small things, and those small things can become very big things when we give energy to them. Well, thank you again for spending this time with us at Finding Joy in the Hard. I'd love it if you'd share this episode with a friend, someone you think could really benefit and learn from it. I wish I had a podcast like this when I was going through my hards. That's all for now. I wish you the best. And until next time, be well.